Okay. Thank you everyone for being here, and thanks for coming to our session. Rick and I, have been working together for quite some time, but specifically over the last 2 years, we have been, and we are continuing, and we're at the end of a 3-year grant to implement ZTC, zero textbook cost, specifically in our discipline with AI. So this presentation is going to first cover just kind of like where where we have our experience right now, what we've seen, what we're developing, what we've created. Because the thing is, I think everybody comes to this topic in their own unique discipline. And what I'm going to show you today is how I use it for the specific discipline I teach in, and it may or may not translate to your specific discipline. So this is where the more questions you ask, the more conversation we can have. And I'm just going to tell you right now, we will not have all the answers. We will either say, that's a great question. I've heard, like, so as an example, yesterday I heard the whole concern about writing and how if part of your course has a big writing component, how do we deal with that in the day and age of Gen AI? Because it does, it writes a B-level paper, right? So how do we deal with that? And I know we've had some interesting conversations around that, but for me, I think one of the things I see is that we're going to have to really be more agile and ask the question of how do we teach in this new age that we're in? And this is something I think a lot about. I've approached my course trying to be AI first, like I'm really doing that. And you'll see the way I have approached that in this presentation.
Yeah, and
Rick, anything you want to add to that?
yeah, and I hope that we can, kind of talk about some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges, as well as we are using AI. Because I know we've done this presentation before, and a lot of it was like a lot of intro stuff, and we welcome those questions as well. But it would be nice if we get, we're gonna try to see if we can touch on those points a little bit closer in depth in this one. So. Yeah, just look out for those and reach out if I don't. Because
Yeah,
I'd love to hear other people's feedback, how it's going with them as well, and what has been changing, like the landscape of how students are learning. What are some other pedagogical practices that are getting into play and stuff like that. But as we go along, hopefully we'll be able to cover that because I know that there's just so much to cover. So
there
just
is.
if you want to hear about that, you're not hearing it, just reach out in the chat or or out loud or whatever. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. So thank you, Rick. And I'll be talking a little more at the beginning, and then Rick will interject, and then we'll finish up with Rick's demo of what he did over the summer. So we'll
Mhm.
end up there. But what we're gonna do first is I'm gonna bring up. Matter of fact, let me do it here. Can you all, and let me copy this in and put it into the chat so you have it there as well. This is a site that we're going to use for both getting some information about where you would rank yourself as far as your view of AI and then what you might like to learn. But let's first just get you all on there, right? And answer any, hopefully you don't have any snags to do this. You can just open it up in a new tab wherever you're at. And I see some people already coming in there. We got 21 people so far, so that's awesome. Because the thing is about a presentation, any kind of presentation, and really we all know this as educators, this is a lot more interesting when there's questions that come up, like when students are engaged. So when you're engaged, right? When you're engaged in this content, it makes it better for all of us. And I know it's a little more challenging online, but it's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible. I mean, for those of us that teach online, we have to figure out the best way to do that with RSI. We have to figure out how to make that something just a part of our natural course. Okay, so let's go. So here's my first question to you, and you can just click which one, like which of the following best describes your current feeling about Gen AI? So we could talk about, and if you don't know the term Gen AI, I'm guessing many of you do, but if you don't, so it's generative AI, and it's part of the larger category of AI. There are definitely, we're seeing more variations. Gen AI is, of course, the most popular right now. And we're actually seeing also an implementation from just doing generative content, text, video, images to actually doing agentic things. And what that means is we're moving from generative content to actually doing things in the world. So this is one of the really amazing things that we're seeing happening, but also requires us, of course, understanding how do we put pieces together. So as an example, when you're chatting with ChatGPT, you're getting information back, but how do you actually use AI to accomplish tasks that might be really just repetitive? And how can we make our lives maybe, more productive? I mean, that probably has a loaded term, but how can we do that? And that's something that we definitely see already implemented. I had a plan over the summer to actually implement an agent for my Canvas course, but what happened was the campus actually shut out some of the access that we had because of the fraudulent issues. So I'm just trying to figure out another way to do that. But how many of you have participated? Interesting. Okay, so 36 of you have. We have 64 here. So some of you either didn't get there or don't want to tell me, which is totally fine. Um, so it looks like pragmatist, right? So, I see the benefits and the risk, and I'm focused on practical application. That really does make sense. Guess what? The prior session actually was the cautious observer, was number one. So it's an interesting thing to see. This is of course a smaller group. That's not what matters. What matters is our view. So anybody want to shout out in the discussion kind of, any more detail or where they came to that view or anything related to this part? Yes, this is where you participate.
Well, I'll
Hmm.
say out loud,
Yeah,
like
yeah, go
in
ahead. Yeah, that'll be a
the
good
last
conversation
one,
starter.
yeah, like I felt like it was hard for me to like kind of put myself in, a couple of these,
Yeah,
one of these categories because I
sure.
think like I'm a pragmatist with a lot of things, and I'm also an optimist, and some people might see that as naive because I do believe in the good in a lot of things, but I also like to criticize, like critically
Mhm.
analyze, what's happening, and what are the costs, the benefits, how is it going to change society? It's really hard to predict a lot of those things, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty as well. So, when I got into AI, I was really excited, like because it felt like I was in a sci-fi, but then, immediately went into, how do we constructively, look at this, and think about how is this gonna, lend to the society and how culture is
Mhm.
gonna change, what's gonna shift, and those are things that like we could not predict. There are things like in my hackathons in San Francisco where I was like, wow, like I did not expect, this company like Character AI, I don't know if anyone knows that, I didn't
Oh
expect
yeah.
so many kids to be like so excited about talking to Shakespeare in a
Yeah.
chat, so there's like possibilities became, like, oh wow, there's just such, it's a plethora of beautiful things, but also there was this kind of, internal, this internal kind of strife
There
about like
definitely
where
was
it's
with
gonna go.
character AI. There was a very well-known case with character AI and how things definitely went south because of the interaction, for sure. That's a great. I hope I didn't talk over you there, Rick.
No, no, it's good. No, and I love if anyone wants to interject and stuff, I know,
Tiffany
yeah.
made a comment that I think
Very
is
good.
really good here
Oh,
about
nice.
the concern because of the privacy, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is something that, by the way, in whichever of the applications, we call them LLMs, but really it's with the application we're interfacing with, you can actually change it to not, tell it, I don't want to share my personal information. Every one of them have a privacy setting. You just need to find it and turn it off. Or if you're okay, then just know that that's true. The app that you're going to see that we've created, we have not sent any student data over to these LLMs because that's what part of an education we shouldn't do. So that's a really good question. If you want to go look, I could help. If at the matter of fact, we had a couple of people hang out at the end of our last one and we answered questions. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and then I saw Ruby's question here,
Go
and
ahead.
I thought it was really yeah, how to use it to its full potential
Mm,
benefits, right? And I think we were talking, me and Rio, retro, after the first one, we were talking about how, there's it doesn't have to just be about this Q&A, conversations that we have, like a lot of people look at ChatGPT as, okay, yeah, I can ask it a question, it gives me answers. But like, Rio said about, there's agentic things going on. There's a lot of things with like vision. There's a lot of things with, it's not just one, there's so many different benefits, and I hope we can get to some of those, Ruby, and
yeah.
like we could save some for like the end too as well. I'm going to show you how I can create a website, like with one line, with one prompt, like I think one or two sentences, and I'm gonna use it to create a course website, right? The landing page for the course I'm working on, for this fall or something like that. So there are a lot of different kinds of uses besides just like the Q&A that I hear a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And then do we have another one? Like something else. We throw things out and then like 5 years down the road, we realize the X, Y, and Z errors and we did not at all expect the outcomes. Yeah. So we 100% know. Well, let me go back to that one. It's a good question. There are a series of unintended consequences. Isn't
Mhm.
that true, right? I see people talking about this and I see very little measurement of these possibility outcomes. And that's why is faster better. That's right. Is
Yeah.
faster better. Very good. Yeah. So thanks Alta for actually talking about one of the slides that I'm going to go over because that's part of the concern that I see as well. And, I think we just have, I mean, with the position we're all in, we need to be thoughtful and think about how do we help. We first have to help ourselves navigate this in order for us to help the students. And that's a really important part of what we're here to do. I see some thumbs up on that comment.
Yeah, I think to
Concerns? Go
add to
ahead.
that.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I think to add to that too, and I think I remember you from last time, Zoltan. So I think it's faster, like measurably or efficient. I think that we lose a lot of efficiency. Like, I could speak to my profession recently. Like, I'm having AI write a lot of my code, and even what I worked on today, or sorry, I've been working on for ZTC. And, it seemed like I took a lot of time just trying to figure out how this junior developer trained, AI, like, how to like debug things that like I wouldn't normally debug, and I normally wouldn't get into these kinds of issues. So like, yeah, this faster mean better. I mean,
Mm,
also we've heard, and I'll stop here with this analogy or this little story, but we also heard and I know this is like, thematic, right? To like, we're
mhm.
talking about, computer science or like, web development and stuff like that. But we've heard people like, vibe code and create like all these, crazy applications, but then all of a sudden they don't know how to fix them, or like they don't know how to use version control, so their whole app just gets deleted. And they're like, I don't know what happened. I just vibed this and now everything's
Yeah, no,
gone.
it's so
So,
true.
like it's
I
faster,
heard that same
better, it's
story.
faster, efficient, there's
Yeah.
a lot of like, yeah, there's a lot of things with that too as well.
Great. That's so true, right? And there was some good comments here. So, they're skeptical, right? And there's like, but the reality is it's here, right? It's progressing. Exactly. How do we help shape its positivity? How do we help students benefit? How do we help students help the employers they're going to be, because these employers are going to expect these students to come in with some level, right? And then how do we be the change? How do we help with that? But also helping them understand, which is actually where I think it's a good place for me to jump off, because if you were to ask me a year ago, I would have definitely put myself somewhere between the enthusiast and the pragmatist. It's like as wakes, I am still, but I was definitely excited to see, because I had a vision of what I wanted to create in my classroom, and then I thought it might help others. but it's very, very practical as well. Like I'm very, I see the benefits, but there are definitely some risks. And now I'm a little more somewhere between here, depending on the day and the topic. Honestly, it depends on what part of this I'm talking about. So to go back to my slides, I say this because one of the things that I see, like if I was to kind of put a spectrum of like where I think it actually does amazing things is on the example of using AlphaFold. I don't know how many of you know, right? But AlphaFold comes from DeepMind out of Google. And it was created as the descendant of AlphaGo, and AlphaGo was the thing that beat the world champion Go players, and they used this same infrastructure built upon it, of course, to then map proteins because it's very hard for humans with the amount of data and amount of processing required to actually understand the folding and therefore the function of these proteins. And AI allowed us to gain significant progress in a short amount of time relative to how far we had come before. Now, you could actually make maybe the argument is, are we ready to know all that, right? So, but I think in the overall scheme, this is a really positive thing. And then to kind of put the other side of that spectrum together, it's like the London taxi driver is to me a really good example. Although I could think of others, it's like when the London taxi drivers and back in the day before GPS had to actually memorize streets and landmarks. When people would want to go somewhere, they knew they had to know how to get there. And when studied at the brain cognitive level, they were more spatial memory, there was more cognition, their hippocampuses were bigger. And when GPS came along, we saw a diminishment. And so, if we extrapolate that example out to ourselves and to our students, and this was voiced earlier, I heard in the chat, that's a real concern. It's like, how do we both use AI to its great benefit, but also not lend and not rely too heavily so that we're not gaining that really important part of being human, because this is part of the thing I enjoy about life. I'm just going to speak for myself. It's like I really enjoy learning and I enjoy doing new things. And it is, I don't know. It's just, and I think we live in a world too where the immediacy of having an answer and, it's like, I'll just move on. I got an answer and move on without really thinking. I think there was another paper that was just a study that was done over the summer where they took a group of students. They actually said, hey, write this essay. They did it with AI and then they did it without AI. And then they tested them afterwards. And the ability to recall those concepts and that information was better for those that didn't use it, right? So this is definitely, we know, and you could pick apart this study, but I think it's more of like, hey, this is something I feel like, and this is part of why I've moved more to the, where I get concerned. The biggest concerns besides this for me are the amount of energy that AI is using is significant. And I feel like we're not being thoughtful. We're just implementing without actually having a good plan for this, right? One of the things I do to try to offset this is I run local so that I don't have to hit the data centers because the data centers are soaking up a lot of water. They're pulling a lot of electricity, and we're seeing loss in some of the gains that we were making around this issue. So that's one. The other one that I have is that we're not being as thoughtful as I would like to see us about the larger impacts to the economy, and to people's jobs, and how do we help them navigate, right? How do we, do we just do a huge retraining, right? That could definitely be part of it. And that's where in education, we can kind of say maybe we should be, in my opinion, filling some of that hole in there. So I know I've talked a lot here. Anything, Rick, you want to point to that people are saying in relationship to this?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at different themes here, and one that I picked up was like, how can we use this for positive, right? Like, what are, because Rio's talking about the environmental impact, and then there's the other side of like, it's here to stay. There's nothing we can do at
Yeah.
this point, like. it's like a kind of like a Pandora's box, right? So it's a very complex issue where, a lot of people don't, there's different sides of it where some people don't want to adopt it completely. Some people want to completely just like blindly follow it, for lack of a better term to say that. So, like I would like to believe that our app was supposed to, it's still our app's goal is to, have this in a positive way that like to help students like, learn how to use the tool in a way that, is not just a question and answer, but, we started off as an exploratory kind of chat application. And, like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of things of like, oh, well, what else can we use it with, right? I think
Hmm.
our app kind of solves that kind of problem of not just doing a Q&A, but also like, having the exploration kind of part, having a discussion, filling in the gaps, some supplemental, information that you'd want to get from the application. I would like to believe like when Rio asked me about, joining, in 2023 when I was in San Francisco, I'm here again, that we're going to try to do something a little bit different and, and kind of work with, what's happening and see how we can integrate, a lot of these tools that like are not leaving anytime soon or at all, and how we can get students to kind of get acclimated to some of that.
Great points. Great points. Thanks, Rick. So I went ahead and pulled up my local. So many of these, and ChatGPT or OpenAI just over the last 2 or 3 days has actually released an open source version of their LLM. So I'm using a local. So these chat sessions I would do here are not being done out on the cloud, therefore out on the data center. So, and not everybody has the kind of machines or the information, the ability to set up this kind of thing, but I'm really just showing you as an example of some of the ways that I think we could think about how do we use, because we all have generally good processors setting on our desk, and how can we use some of that if we want to do some of this work. And that kind of leads probably into the question is how do we, I mean, I don't know how you feel about your prompting skills, and of course improving those is way important and really helpful to your own process. But that's just one of the examples that I can at least point to that I really try to do. Um, let's see, do we have another question? One of my classes, we have students use AI to write auto S Lisp routines. Right. Yeah, that would make sense. Is that a good thing in your opinion, James? Like, if you found that to be a good experience where they have it just generate the Lisp code for them, the routines? And
Yeah,
do they then have to actually go in and understand and modify that code, or?
yeah, because we're not teaching the programming side as
Right,
much, and
right.
because that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah,
And so what we used to do is we'd have them go find examples of existing routines and teach them how to load them and use them. Now they're creating their own, troubleshooting it to make sure that it actually performs the way they want to perform, and it makes their workflow better.
yeah.
Um, is a
Yeah,
helpful thing for
yeah,
them.
so they
Right.
lean into it without having it's like the black box concept, right? So you create it, it runs, it does what you need it to, and only when, and this is I think what Rick was trying to say earlier, yeah, you can create a site with one prompt, but when you want to take it to the next level, then you actually have to dig in and do something more. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Good.
think yeah, one of the points that me and Rio were trying to like, push, and I'm glad that you mentioned this or, is that instead of using AI as a Q&A kind of machine that we try to work on, certain things like the iterative process, right? Being able to work with AI to come up with solutions, maybe, like, again, I mentioned supplemental, but like, I know it lends really well with programming, more than, maybe a different discipline. But I haven't thought about ways that we could do an iterative process in other disciplines because, like, I live, breathe, and eat code all day. So, but I think that having like that's it's another skill that like of like problem solving, right? Being able to see a problem and find the solution, and sometimes AI won't give you the solution, because and then we call it hallucination and stuff like that, or it's just that whatever you're feeding it, it's not really bringing out the results, and that in itself is kind of a skill to
Yeah.
be able to to talk about a problem, to understand the problem, to ask the right kind of questions
Yeah,
will
because
come up.
many times with hallucination, it's because you haven't given enough context, maybe. And I mean and I'm not saying that's always the case, but that definitely could lend itself that if you don't give it enough context, it works off probabilities. It has a result and it has a probability. And if you don't give it enough, it's gonna probably choose something that isn't directly relevant or as on point because you haven't given enough context, right? Is that what you're saying, Rick?
Yeah, definitely. And, because I think a lot, I guess this is kind of to, respectfully, kind of have a point, or a counterpoint against, some people are like, oh, it's just a calculator, it's like it's going to make people not think and just like get the answers that they need. And I guess for some, overall, a lot of basic questions, you'll definitely get those, kind of answers. But like, if your discipline or whatever you're working on lends well to critical thinking and to really like you can't just say, "Hey, solve this problem," or like, sometimes you can't just say something very general because it won't know exactly what you want it to do. And so, like you have to have some kind of knowledge, and trying to, frame your how do you say, like, some of your courses that have AI and stuff like that, trying to frame it in such a way that it's not just a Q&A, but it's all, it's exploratory, it's iterative, it's problem solving, something to that effect, would help out a lot, I think.
Great. I went ahead and moved if you want to go back to the interactive link I put in, I could put it in again. It's the same one. We're going to now ask, like, what would you like to learn to do in AI? Like, what is something, give us some examples. So it might spark some conversation about, some people in here might have ideas about how you might do that. What would you like to learn? And I was going to specifically frame it in relationship to the classroom, but it doesn't necessarily have to be because AI is a tool. And this was the point of when I was thinking about this presentation, because some of us use it for course content creation. I'll show you how I do that in a minute. And then some of us just, I mean, there's so many personal ways. Like over the summer, I did a huge bike ride and I definitely used it to help me do some planning, some understanding of the area I'm going to be in, right? I mean, there's just, and you can just put in here, right? So how, create, well, this is going to be a word cloud. So give us some of the ways or some of the things you would like to, how to create a test. I'll actually show you, that's actually going to be my demo. So hopefully that will be helpful. It will be using the product we had. So detect AI in papers. Boy, this has come up now every time I give this presentation and I don't have a good answer here. And I do think everyone knows this is an issue, right? That detecting AI when students are using it. And I think this is where we need to start flipping the script or at least rethinking what we're trying to accomplish and how we can leverage it for an iterative process. Like maybe, right, showing the students like the benefit of doing a draft and going to AI to help you polish it and doing an iterative process versus just because that's how I use it. When I want to write something, I get my thoughts down. I somewhat organize it and then I let it give me example or give me, hey, and then I'll change it. I'll go, oh, wait, no, I want the tone this way or I want it this way. So it's just that iterative process. We're creating cool assignments, right? Research, that's awesome. Translation, interesting. Actually, I think this has definitely been something that's much better only because over my trip over the summer, right? I mean, our phones are actually really good at this too, right? And somebody was, I can't remember what language it was. We just held it up and we were able to have a conversation. But AI is definitely doing some of that as well. Organizing my to-do list, for sure, it can do that. Even help you create it based on what you need. Let's see, detecting AI, organizing my taxes. Now, that's a really interesting one, right? Organize. So this is where, and I'll just pull this up. Like when I look at, and by the way, if you kind of want to Gen AI, generative AI is just a subset of deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. But there are other types of intelligence coming into reality, like Google just released one that actually is going to model the world. We'll see how that works. It'll be very interesting. So, and then what are the factors that have led to where we're at? Better algorithms like transform massive amounts of data and increase compute power. But I was really heading here to actually talk about, go down a little bit to the idea, and we could talk about AGI, but the roadmap to becoming a power user. Pick your tool, right? These are kind of the big three. Choose the right model for the task. This one's a little harder, I think, right? Do deep research is definitely a thing. You know, we have experienced generative AI just quickly responding, but like anything, if we give it a little more time to think about something, deep research is really helpful. Multimodal, meaning, hey, you can not only chat, text, but voice is really helpful. I find often I will ask it more questions because I can just do it on my phone, about whatever I'm doing, and here's to get, and, I'm not saying you all want to be power users, but writing better prompt. And that's where I was actually heading down here. It was like, if we're writing better prompts, right? What do we want to do? Right? Just add context. I mean, that's definitely like one of the basic things I say. Add more context, because it's like if you're talking to somebody and you don't help them understand what you're trying to convey to them, let's say in a lecture, right? Or in just a personal commit, if we add more context, that's going to give, in this case of prompting, the generative model, the LLM, a better opportunity to reply with what we want. And also providing these background documents. I think that's why I was here, right? Somebody asked me about, there was something that spurred me to come here. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, ask again if I didn't handle it. But be clear, right? Be clear and specific, right? Iterative. And I think this is the one I have found, because the one thing is, last year I was definitely a chat GPT. I've converted over to Gemini for now, and mostly because I just wanted to experiment with a different model. And I'll tell you about my experience of that, and what happened in that process. Ask for a lot of things, right? AI doesn't get tired or resentful. Ask for 50 things. If you get 10, ask for 50 plans for how to organize my to-do list, right? And this idea of using branching to where when you're in the chat session, you can actually go ahead and modify one of your prompts to see how it would change. And this prompt that I'm actually in right here is probably not a good one because it's my 3-month long one I'm going to talk about in a minute. But and then few shot is kind of about based on here. The more examples you can give AI of good examples, that can be really helpful. Like if a student's writing a resume, maybe somebody's giving them 3 good examples, and if they do that, then giving AI a better, or Gen AI a better example is going to give you a better outcome. Reverse engineering prompt with AI. I do this quite a bit these days, and I've been talking about this is when I get to, based on the conversation, and it's a chat session, but I consider it a conversation I'm having. When I finally get to the place that I actually it's actually given me pretty much what I want. Then what I do then is I say, okay, I ask it, now, reflecting upon this chat session, what prompt would I have used to actually get to this result? So then I use my experience of writing that to then increase my ability to write a better prompt next time. I'm going to kind of pause here and see if we have some questions. Is it free? So they all have a free model, right? Or a free pay, a free tier. Okay. I find for what I want, which is a longer ongoing conversation, that I did end up paying for ChatGPT and for Gemini. I just consider it the tools of what I need and I want to do to have, the output I want to use. So, and I think this is something I know Fresno State, right, has now said all faculty and staff are going to have it. So city, I think or the state center is something that I've heard being talked about, but I'm not sure of the status. Let me roll up here. Oh, Rick, you answered that one already, right? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I
Okay.
know that we talked about that before about how, we've learned that it's really hard to kind of detect AI in papers
Mhm.
There are tools that are trying to do that, but there are ways that, people have been combating that, and so many different models coming out, and so many ways to um, you know, that, students can get around it, anyone can get around it, and, so that, it's a really hard problem to solve. And I know that I know this is a completely different example, but like with images and stuff like that, you can kind of, there's like metadata inside of images to kind of give you some kind of like insight into whether an image was like AI generated or something to that effect. But like, yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough, but I just wanted.
Wes is saying that Grammarly subscription is supposed to include access to ChatGPT for our students. That's great. I had not heard that. So that's interesting. Do you know at what level comparable, Wes? Like, is it comparable to
Yeah,
a
they said
paid
pro.
pro
It's
level?
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
Can I
turn it
ask
in
where
is
you heard
supposed.
that? Was that part
Yeah,
of the announcement that was released?
I think, let me see, I think it's on the little printout that we had, but yeah, I know I'm in the AI work group and I
Okay.
know that they said it was supposed to. I don't know if they've turned that feature on. And then I'm pretty sure in the link that they sent us yesterday to the Grammarly authorship, I
Okay.
think it says that somewhere here as well. But I don't know if it's turned on for our students yet.
Okay. Thank you. That's definitely worth investigating. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Wes. How does one input PowerPoint, I'm assuming, so AI can evaluate it? You can just upload files pretty much, right? You can add files into pretty much anything. You can now in this case I'm in Gemini, but this is pretty common for those, right? You've tested Grammarly and it's fairly accurate. Good. That's great, Mark. Yeah. So this is good information for folks to have about a possible way they could start using it, right?
Yeah, and
It's
there are probably a couple tools, John Volkman, like that. I was just looking up really quick. If you just do a quick like what AI tools look at PPTs, there's a lot of like tools that are more like specified towards really getting the data that's in those kind of PPTs because you know yeah, like a lot of AI offer like an upload, but there's different quality of like what you upload and what the AI will interpret from that. And I've seen that in my job, like uploading different CSVs and images and stuff like that. There's not I don't think there's anyone, in my personal opinion, if anyone has any tools that are really good for PPT specifically, but I use so many different tools for different kinds of data that I need to look at.
mm,
Just so you know, because like I had to create something where I had to upload a PPT and then like parse all that data to kind of create some like data driven kind of stuff, and it can be kind of difficult if you're not using the right kind of tooling and stuff like that, or yeah, so not I don't think there's any tool that I've seen so far, but yeah, like I think different AI, like Ria was talking about how she uses Gemini now. But we started off with like ChatGPT. I use Perplexity, which is a combination of like I think ChatGPT and going to the web, like a kind of agentic,
yeah.
based
Yeah, yeah.
application, so I can get more, confirmation from the web, But anyways, yeah, sorry, I just wanted to kind of talk to that because
Good.
yeah.
That's good. Thanks.
Could I
Thanks.
chime in?
Yeah, for
Could I
sure.
chime
Go ahead,
in?
Tom. Yep.
Um, so just a couple of reflections on this entire conversation. And the first one is to really, it's a paradigm shift between the age of information and the age of understanding. And the age of information was really the web era where we had all this information and we did things in a certain way in the web era. And part of that is we had to synthesize everything as humans. And we also, when we search for things, we were trained over the last 25 years when we went to Google to have really short searches, right? Like if I wanted the best restaurants near me, that's the exact phrase that I put in, best
Right.
restaurants near me, super short. And that's the age of information, the age of understanding. The paradigm shift, which is really good, is to think about talking with humans instead of talking with machines. And so Rio's already spoke to this a little bit, but you really want to give a lot of context and you just provide as much information as possible, as if you were talking to me or Rio or somebody else. And I kid you not that the prompts that I enter will be like, I don't know much about this. I can't remember what it's called, but it's that thing in
Yeah.
physics where it like has mass and energy, but nobody
Right.
knows anything about it. And how is that related to the James Webb? There was some new article that came out. Do you know that article? And can you tell me more about this? Like,
Yeah.
it's the craziest rambly kind of thing, which if I said that to a person who had a PhD in physics, they'd be like, oh yeah, I
Oh,
totally
yeah,
know what
yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about. Like, that's
Right.
how you talk. And
Right.
so the amazing thing is that we've gotten now, we had information overload in the age of information, and now we've created a tool which synthesizes all of that information and returns understanding. So in the past, we had to generate that understanding, but now today, AI generates understanding from all that information. So we just
Yeah.
dialogue with it.
Yeah.
So like the main thing there, the main takeaway is just talk to it like you're talking to a person. And related to that, when you go to different people, you get different strengths and different weaknesses. And it's the same way with these LLM, large language model chatbots. When you go to different chatbots, you get different strengths and different weaknesses. And so I will be like, sometimes like I needed to do something with a CSV, a comma separated value file the other day. And I had some data and I needed it to be parsed into a table that I could copy paste. And I went to Grok, I went to Gemini, I went to Copilot, and I went to ChatGPT, and I asked each of them to do it. Two of them
Mm,
failed and two of them succeeded. I was
yeah.
like, okay, great. For that task, Grok's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Exactly.
more you kind of get into this space, the more you learn the personalities, and those personalities shift over time as new models come out. But Grok is really great for legal, I've
Yeah.
discovered. And Claude is like the best for writing code for me right now. That's my experience.
Yeah.
So, just think about it like you're now talking with truly humans, but it's artificial intelligence, and talk to them like you talk to another human. So that's my perspective on that.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks,
Oh,
man.
is that Todd? Yeah, I was gonna ask, who is that?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
no, I'm glad
That's,
that you brought that up because we,
yeah.
we touched on this before in our previous, even like, a couple months back, now a year, I guess, and I think it's really important that, yeah, like this synthesis, the synthesis of information and how we look at like how to understand that. It's actually a pretty good, counterpoint or, talking point when, people will say that it's just a calculator that, is like kind of what I was mentioning about how it's just this QA that, we're doing, that. And I think that, yeah, like it's fundamentally changed the way that, and this is what I talked about before, and I think these are the positives that I think me and Rio, we wanted to talk about how, like, the after effects of a year of us doing all this too, right? But I think, I think it reminds us of like where we were at that time because, and how much I've changed with that as well, because I've been able to communicate more with my engineering team. I've been able to, because a lot of things that I do, it's all in my, like, I don't like, I'm kind of, how do you, it's hard to explain, but and I've gotten better to explain it. But basically, my brain is very abstract, and sometimes like what I'm trying to do procedurally, I'm not able to communicate that, to my engineering team and stuff like that. And now like being able to, really, a lot of metacognition, a lot of really thinking about, what I'm gonna say, how I'm gonna say it, how to formulate this, and even with friends, just getting to the point of like certain conversations or like getting to their understanding of what they're trying to
Yeah.
come
Yeah. Yeah.
has helped
Yeah.
me out
Yeah.
drastically. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Great points. Really great points. So because we have a couple more things we want to show you, we're going to move to that. But I love the interaction. I really appreciate all the input. I think Peter, what'd you say? The other dynamic of the age of information is always needed to vet the information we're receiving, right? As opposed to going a reference library, right? Where we're fairly sure that the information we receive is accurate. That's true, right? And that's where we have to start talking about the information, the
Yeah.
quality of the information that the LLMs have been trained on. This has definitely been a point of discussion, right? Because there's a common beginning data set that the foundational models have been trained on. And then, of course, would they add more, right? Then they have humans actually go through them. I mean, that whole process, if you want to read the book, Empire of AI actually talks about this to the extent that you kind of go, wow, that's amazing. And also kind of scary of what's happening there. Yeah. Any other
I,
questions before we move on?
well,
Anything
real quick, I
else?
wanted to add to that. I just
Sure.
want to say that to me, it was a trade-off
Yeah.
because, and I hate to say this because of my dad in my day, but the idea of having to
Right.
use books and encyclopedias, you knew it was accurate for the most part. The trade-off is, okay, it's instantaneous now. I love that, but I gotta check it because otherwise it could be very wrong. And
Yeah.
because there's so much. So I mean, it's just to me there's a
Yeah. Yeah.
trade-off to that.
Yep.
You
Absolutely.
you get speed, but now you have to vet everything.
Yeah. But that goes back to that idea of that we still need to, as humans, right, have this ability to increase
Absolutely.
our own cognition and our own spatial, all of that, because that's part of what, as human, we want to have. And figuring out how much we can offload to maybe focus on the things we want is in part of that.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question here about, you mentioned these AI names. How do you get to them? Oh yeah, so we were talking about Grok. We're talking like if you just type, matter of fact, somebody, if they would just type some of these in, like Chat GPT, the address, Claude, the address, Gemini, the address. These have, almost all of them have a free freemium, right? That's a term we use a lot, a freemium level to where you can go to them and just start interacting. I think every one of them also have a mobile app that you can also interact that way. You create an account. We just heard today that students are getting, I would assume faculty are getting it part of Grammarly too. So we can definitely check into that if that's helpful. I was wondering, same. Okay, good. Good. A couple of people. Is anybody doing that, Rick, or is somebody willing to do that while I move on?
You want me to provide a resource? I'm
No,
sorry.
just put in some links to the common chatbots, the generative AI, the Grok, the Chat GPT, right?
Sure.
Because people are just asking, because we're throwing out names and they're like, what are you guys talking about, right? So here's what happens in tech, right? We start to go down the rabbit hole and use terms and people are like, what are you guys talking about? So we need to pull back often and talk about, like, here's where you find these resources, right? Create free accounts to get started.
So I'm
Okay.
gonna do something even a little bit different. I'm gonna add that into Perplexity,
Okay.
Meta, and then I'll just give that list. I'll have AI write that list for me.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Offload that cognition. There you go. Okay. So what anybody else wanted to chime in before we move on? Okay. So you already did the part before I discussed. So how am I using AI currently? So in my task, and actually it began at the end of last semester, is I teach JavaScript. And part of teaching JavaScript, for me, a very important part is a project-based code base that we as a class we do together. And I've implemented this idea of a carbon footprint so they can, see their carbon footprint, but more importantly, they can actually build the form that calculates it, stores it, and does everything from a programming perspective that we find important skills to have. And I had written the code on my own 3 years ago, and I'd been through the years updating it as I felt like it needed to be updated. But at the end of this last semester, I started what turned out to be a 3-month conversation in Gemini about this project. And it was amazing. What happened for me was that I was able to tell it, hey, here's my requirements. I even gave it the code example of the ending project that I had created. And then I said, okay, I want this to be brought up to best practices, right? So I want to actually take my project that I had created on my own prior and say, now, because coding is such a wealth now and in the LLM space, is because we have so many new tools that it's so great that I can actually send it and say, hey, give me best practices so I can then teach best practices. Now, if I just left it at that, that would have been a great accomplishment, but I can't, because what I need to do, and that's part of what I started to do through this conversation, which I was amazed, lasted 3 months. I have had the experience to where after a certain amount of time, the context, and this is like goes to the concept of a context window, is how much can a session actually and the LLM, because that's a lot of information for it to keep in the context of the conversation. And I would often, last year with ChatGPT, I'd started another chat session based on kind of the ending result. But in this case, I was really amazed that Gemini, and this is probably true for all of them now because they are all just leapfrogging. There's just an amazing amount of this gets increased, this new feature gets added. So now this conversation lasted 3 months. And at the end, I was actually then, because I gave it my requirements, right? And then what I did is I took that ending project and I said, okay, let's work on week by week by week. And what it did is it gave me some instruction, but the instruction it gave me, I felt like wasn't at the level I wanted to teach. I felt because, again, of my experience of teaching students, I needed to actually do it myself. And not only that, explain it. So what I did, and you can see this was my summer project, is I went through and I did what's called a code along. So in our discipline, because we use something called version control, you don't have to know what that is. But what we can do is students actually have to code along with me. So this is like, their book where they're, following along with me and they have to do commit messages. It would not be easy for them to just go out and grab that code because they actually have specific code they have to do. Now, could somebody probably do it? Yeah, it just wouldn't be worth their time, I think. What do I know? But in this case, so let me slow down. Okay, so I used Gemini to first create that ending project. And then what I did is I used Gemini then to help me create what I'm terming checkpoints. And these checkpoints go, okay, now that the student has done the work of my lecture, so to speak, now I want to see how well they gained that knowledge or that experience. And I'm doing this with AI, and that's what I'm about to show you. So for my class, and some of you have seen my demos in the past regarding the product that we were just so happy to be a part of with the ZTC we've been working on for the last coming up on 3 years, has been to implement zero textbook cost into the classroom with an AI focus. So when I was doing this type of review assignment before, I was doing it very differently. What I ended up doing was having Gemini actually take my concepts, review that, come up with a list of questions, and my prompt then would then be more of a personalized to what the student was replying to actually help them learn the concepts. So is it perfect? No, but this is how it's working as of now. So the student goes into the assignment, and I am, believe it or not completely done with my courses to be released on Monday, but they're going to answer 5 concept questions and they're going to complete 5 coding challenges. Okay, and so when they click, what it does is it takes them, in this case, out of Canvas into I was in here earlier, so it had to drop the token. So it takes them into this the environment that Rick has created. And in this case, we have to say, okay, disclaimer, and I could talk about all this, but basically what we want the student to know is we're not sending your personal information over. In this case, we're using in the background OpenAI's API, and all that means is that the computers are talking at their level. We're not using the actual interface that you would think of as for the chatbot. So now what I have is the student will start, and I've termed these, and this was something I will give them more video content to understand how these things work. But the first thing they're going to do is click start. And this is where I'm going to send, they're not going to see it, but I'm going to send a bit of context to the LLM to tell it how I want them to interact with the student as they walk through the concepts questions, and then also how they do for the coding questions. It says, welcome to this checkpoint. Let's get started. Click step 1 to begin. So now we are in a chat generative AI process, right? So now question 1, explain the difference between these two. And the student might say something like, let assigns, if I can type, a value. I can't type, and const, well, I'm not sure. Okay. So if the student says something like that, then in this case, it's going to give them a little hint, a little like, hey, you know, almost will think about the keyword constant. So in this case, if the student had nailed this question, absolutely nailed it, it actually may do a follow-up to actually ask them something more, you know, technical around that, or just it would branch off based on the way the student interacts with it. So then I'm not obviously going to go through this whole thing, but then they have to click through this and no, they cannot cut and paste. This is something I get every time. So I'm going to show you is they can't go over to their favorite LLM, grab a piece of content that might answer that and then paste it in here. And because that's not helpful, and you know, we give it a message. Now, some say, well, wait a minute, they could just type it. And I would say, you know what? That's a way of interacting with the content that they will learn. May not be the ultimate, you know, idea, because ultimately for my students taking this course, they have to do a technical interview with me. And this is what I tell them from the beginning is, listen, you are going to have to technically interview with me. So that means you actually are going to have to learn how to code. And then ultimately, when you get to the end and I hear, are we in a time limit? 2 minutes? Are
Oh,
we?
we finished at 2:15.
Holy
Sorry.
Mac. Okay. Thank you. So once they get all the way through and they submit the assignment, and then that assignment is submitted into Canvas, and as the instructor, then I can go in and actually review the conversation that they were having. And some have asked me, well, is this constitute RSI? And the answer would be, depends on how you're interacting here. But a way I may do this, I do this, because by the way, my students have been using this type of assignment for the last 2 semesters, over 150 students, over 50 to 70 assignments, over many of my all of my courses use something like this. So many of them have given me the feedback that they really like this because it's not just a standard quiz. It is really just helping them extend their knowledge. Okay. So let me slow down and answer any questions that you have about this. I know I talked really fast. No questions? So let me just say why you're maybe thinking of some. So this process that has been created has actually, you know, handled outside of Canvas, but then submits back into Canvas. And over the summer, matter of fact, Rick, why don't I let you talk about this? Why don't we switch over and let you, because I think last time I stole some of your thunder.
Yeah, I was in the chat. I was writing 2 minutes.
Yeah, you got it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and let you talk about why we and what we were doing and why we needed to do it. So don't forget to talk about that.
Yeah, so we had the app. Uh, Oops, sorry. I need to stop you from sharing.
No, I already did
That's
start
weird.
it.
Okay, there it goes.
Yeah, I just did it. Sorry, you
Um,
probably were too quick on the update.
sure. Okay, so yeah, essentially, and sorry, I'll go into the chat app. Sorry, the Canvas first, I guess, really quick. But
Yeah.
essentially, we took that same application. Some of you guys have seen this from what Reels built, and what we did was we ended up adding it into Canvas through LTI integration. And so this is going to make this a little more secure. This is going to put more control for the district to, more visibility. And so when now the way that this application works is like here's a course, and so basically you enable the Canvas, AI Canvas chat, and the teachers are able to write the name of the step, just like how Rio had it, like you saw the guided buttons there. So tell me a joke. And then I'm gonna just leave this as, oh no, I went back, or where did I go? Sorry about that. Mac does
Something's funny, yeah.
yeah, I'm always all over the place with Mac.
So Rick's given you some just simple context. Imagine that you could definitely have, and I know Wes would feel this, is definitely a lot more content in there. He's just trying to show you the LTI version here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, you're doing great.
Yeah, I can't talk and do things at
I
this.
know, it's hard.
Where is the one? Was it
Go
Flex?
back to the main page, maybe.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there's your Flex Day assignment.
Okay. So So yeah, so basically, this is the chat here. Those are the steps that you saw. I'm gonna skip over because but basically you can save your steps. The steps, have the step name and the step prompt. And when you open this up, you can see that it starts off with a joke, right? So here you're at step one of two, those two steps that I showed you. The next step is something interesting, right? And right here it tells us a joke, right? Haha, another. And so so we go through, the chat here, like that we did before, and now we go ahead and click something interesting, which this just gives us an interesting, just a little interesting fact about random things, right? And then, once you're done, I don't know, thank you, thanks, whatever for now. And so I know Todd saying, does it work and all these other things. I didn't have time to finish the UI for this, but it works and I'll show that. But basically, once we submit the assignment here, oh wait, oh I did it again,
You
Rio.
did it where you
You
didn't do a
you
student
didn't
view.
stop me.
I didn't catch it again.
You're supposed to view as a student, so sorry about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So
Um,
as a student would.
thank
Just like as instructors, we can't necessarily submit unless we're
We'll
as
fix
a
that
student
late.
view.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
But for now, yeah, there's permissions there. Um, and yeah, so I'm just gonna say great, so you can see that.
So you
Okay.
can see this feels very similar, but this is not an external app. This is an internal app to Canvas.
Yep. And so as you submit, and so if we go to the grade book, we're able to see that there is a submission here, and we'll go ahead and click on that. Go to speed grader, and oh right, because I'm still in. I gotta leave.
Yeah, as a student, you cannot see the grade book. There
Yeah.
you go. There you go.
So here it is. So this is the output that you get. You get the output of the chat. You could add the questions, which the step questions, but I don't think it's necessary here. So we have an option for that to show the step questions or not. I took them off, like you don't see here, tell me a joke, tell me an interesting fact. It just goes straight into, what the assistant said and then what the student said, and you can see the whole back and forth. See that great that I added here. You can add the grades, do the comments, whatever you need to do. I had to rush through that. Does anybody have any questions? So
I think a common question we get about this is, can you use it? And I'm telling you, we would like nothing more than for you to use it. We are just having some challenges getting the district and the campus to, there's always challenges with stuff like this. And especially now with what we're facing with the fraudulent activities, I think they're just really trying to navigate that. And sometimes the unintended consequences that we can't do some things that we'd like to do because of that. And it's hard to get the visibility. And part of our motivation, honestly, is to show this so more people can see possibilities of this. We've had definitely several other instructors. I know Wes tried to use it and we ran into some issues, but I know he was excited. So I'm glad to see him here. But any questions we could answer around this or anything you would like to discuss? You guys are chirpy over there. You're quiet.
yeah, so there are still some things that the last parts of what I need to get done here are just very small like UI changes as far as like some like the major things are finally done with like the permissions and JWT tokens and all the things that we needed to do to get access and submit. Sorry if I'm getting too technical here,
You
but
are.
there
That's
was a
okay.
lot of
There's probably
technical
a
things that
couple
went
people
into
that would
this
get it.
that
Yeah, it's okay. That's okay.
and there was the documentation was a little yeah, it was a little interesting how anyways, so yeah, we're really close to finishing this product. It looks very similar to what Rio had. A lot of this, Wes, I'm glad you're here too, because this kind of another reason that we did this the way that we did. Let me leave student view. is because like before it was really complicated to
Mm-hmm.
for teachers to understand that they need to put HTML and tables and stuff like that, and like and sometimes those tables wouldn't work, they'd break. So we ended up creating some UI for that, so that make it really easy for teachers to to add steps, to open, just to create those prompts, add add new steps, remove steps, anything that we want to do there. And we can also, like I said, this is the show instructions if you want to show them. And then we have allow copy paste. Those are, the main pieces that we have as far as like settings are concerned. And so, yeah, so we're really close. I'd love to see people's feedback on this. And, if you want to reach out to us and email us and see what we can do there. There's so many things that we could do differently. We haven't. There's so many different ways we can make this chat instead of just being a Q&A. We could do a lot of exploratory things. We could do.
Sure.
And I can't. I can't. I want to move on to the next thing. So we got 6 minutes. I'm gonna do this really quick, Rio, and then we can
Okay.
open it up.
Yep.
So I think I've been trying to like create a summary of a lot of different things that have happened. With like building because I built a lot of what you just saw in AI, and there was some some setbacks. There was some optimism, and then I think calling back to like Peter when he said like it's a lot of speed, but you have to vet everything. I had to change
Mm-hmm.
the way that I looked at a lot of these things, and you'll see here like if I were to use a simple prompt here, like I'm just gonna say it. Or here I got it right here. And so like, I think another person that mentioned like specificity, right? Being more specific on what you want AI to do, right? And these kind of things can create issues, right? So once you give it more information, be more specific, it helps out. You'll see here that I'm gonna go and run this while I'm talking. And I think Zoltan, when you talked about like anything in excess, right? I think you alluded to like poison or something, right? And I agree with the fact of not poison, but I agree with like anything in excess. You know, um, it could be bad, right? I think that it's important to have a balance, and I think that my excess was doing too much AI,
Mm-hmm.
and expecting it to do all the things that I needed it to do without having those learning curves that or I had to experience those learning curves, right? Like being more specific, vetting a lot of my code. So a lot of things has changed, as far as like my workflow with those things.
But Rick, wouldn't you also say that because not a lot of people have had examples of LTI building LTI and LTI meaning integrated into Canvas apps,
Mm,
that is a harder thing to have AI do versus something that's more common, right? So the more common something is, the more likely you're going to get helpful output. But at some point, you're going to reach a point that you still have to understand and you're going to have to dig into there. So it's kind of like it helps ramp you up pretty quickly, right? But as again, you're going to have to dig in there, and that often can take you just as long as doing the ramp up. And that's just the nature of these things right now. You have, and like the idea of trying different models and seeing which one. Todd's example was great about seeing which one gave you the output that you wanted.
Yeah, and I think the one of the topics I wanted to talk about last time, and I think I'm a one person team with all of this, and like I'm doing the job of like five different people, and I think
Mm,
that I was trying to think of like how to say this in a way that with the advent of AI, like there's a lot of positive things, and I think that I've seen from experience, like a lot of promises that hey, you're gonna free up a lot of time, but we know that a lot of the times like that freed up time becomes more concentrated with more things.
yeah, because the
So
demand is there, right? So you just get to
yeah.
do more. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's right.
I have my other client, Palo Alto. We're working on this startup application, and we're about to, hopefully get funding. We keep talking about like a lot of those things, and we have big investors and all of that, But it's, so it's hard because like I was joking with my friends, like I do the job of five people with this project, and I do the job of maybe four people on the other project, So somewhere between 5 and 7 people, I'm doing that, and I had to rely on AI a lot to get a lot of these things out as soon as possible. And now my whole team, like in Palo Alto, we're it's AI driven. Like we actually have product working in the code base, which is like remarkable and crazy, but we've managed to do a lot of like really intricate things to get that done. But anyways, here's the website.
Let's
Yeah,
kind of
we
move
got two
into the
minutes.
question part so you
Yeah.
can see what that created. But I really want to see, because we're at the end, if anybody wants to chime in any questions or
Sure, sure.
comments at this point. Thank you, Rick.
Mhm.
And by the way, just to be clear, Rick's reference there to his other project, this project that we built is on under the auspice of the grant. This is nobody's earning money from this. So just because I got accused of that actually, that somebody thought I was making money from the stuff in the grant. And I'm like, no, because I made a joke about it. It's not true. Okay. Can you stop sharing and we'll just kind of end this up and see if there's
Sure.
any questions?
But it's a cool website, right?
Sure. Yeah,
Look at
absolutely.
that. AI did that so quick.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. You're welcome to chime in or you're welcome to make sure, by the way, I think Susie told me to get credit for this. If your screen name doesn't actually have your name on it, make sure that's there or that you've posted something in the chat because that's how they do attendance. But also great time to ask questions. Chirping, chirping, chirping.